All righty. Well, hello, everyone, and happy Friday as we record this. My name is Matt Heinz, and we're going to do another episode of our B2B book club today. Very excited to have with us today Tom Stanfill with us. He is the author of the new book, Unreceptive, A Better Way to Sell, Lead, and Influence. And Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me on. I've a bit of fan, so I love being on your show. Thanks for including me.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, we just sort of we kind of just ad hoc created this new series a couple months ago. Like, we get a lot of books sent our way. There's a lot of books written every year on sales, marketing, business. Some of them are good. A few of them are pretty good. And then a few really do kind of bubble up as like what I think are really great reads, right? I think we're all super busy. We can't read them all. And so what we're trying to do is sort of filter through and find the books and the topics that I think are really useful. And this definitely stood out to me for sure. Talk a little bit about the origin of the book, and sort of, I mean, obviously, like your consulting practice covers a lot of ground in the area of sales. Why this angle? What did you see and hear in the market that made this relevant right now?
That made this a great question. I started my sales career. I'm going to actually go back about 25 years. I started my sales career, or I should say training career, in working with we had a company that actually generated leads and set appointments for our clients. Mm-hmm. So we had 100 people on the phone all day long calling business decision makers and trying to get meetings with them. And what we found very early on is that people weren't rejecting a solution, a product, or a service. They were rejecting a cold call. They were rejecting a sales call.
Yeah.
And so the harder we tried to sell, the more closed and unreceptive the customers became. And so we developed this whole very counterintuitive approach on teaching our reps how to sell over the phone in this most difficult, I guess, sales environment.
Yeah.
And we found that some unique techniques that were working, and we really learned that it really wasn't about selling; it was about creating receptivity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, we started a company to teach other people to sell like we were selling, and now we've been doing that for about 25 years. And what we found is the growing population of customers that are unreceptive to sellers is growing at a rapid pace, primarily due to information, the availability of information, the overwhelming amount of information. And so the traditional approach to selling just doesn't work. And it came to the point where there's just not enough people to sell to because people are just emotionally closed to sellers. And so I just felt really passionate about getting this book to the market.
So one of the other things I really like about the angle you take here is that, I mean, obviously we're trying to get in front of prospects. We're trying to make sure we get more of their attention. And oftentimes, like, we think of that as a sales job. The book is not how to sell, a better way to sell. It's a better way to sell, lead, and influence. So talk about those three things together. The lead and influence part is, I mean, like, I think, you can't judge a book by its cover, but that part of the title really stood out to me. And was one of the main reasons I ended up picking it up and getting through it in the first place. So, like, talk a little bit about how that's different and why that's working so well today.
Well, I think, when you think about selling, obviously that applies to, I'm trying to sell a product or service, and that does, people think of it as how to apply it to that. But leading is really a critical part of what we all do, is we're trying to lead people into a different direction. They're moving in one direction and we're trying to get them to move in a different direction. And we're in that role. All of us are in that role in multiple different, challenges or situations consistently. So it applies to that. Or maybe you're a sales leader, or you're a marketing leader, or you're a leader of your organization. You got to get people to move from, I think we should do this, and you're like, actually, I need to influence you to go to a different direction. And then influence really applies to that as well, is when are we in a situation to where we need to get you to think differently about what you're doing. So I wanted it to be more than just a book on selling. I wanted to be able to apply to people in really multiple roles. Now, there's some very tactical, helpful, models that we teach and strategies for, like, writing emails and getting appointments and, how to lead a discovery meeting. But the majority of the book really applies to almost anybody in the role of influence.
Oh, I think so. And I mean, one of the other reasons I like this book a lot is, like, as reading through it, I'm thinking, like, marketers need to read this. Like, this is a book on selling. It's a book on marketing. If we think about that as a holistic approach today, super important. For those just joining maybe on LinkedIn Live, Welcome to B2B Book Club. We've got Tom Stanfill. He's the author of the new book, Unreceptive, A Better Way to Sell, Lead, and Influence. Literally, I think the book came out a month ago.
Couple of weeks ago,
right?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Unreceptivebook.com. You can learn more about it. Obviously, be able to find it on Amazon. And oftentimes when there's books and literature about selling, we sometimes forget that like we may be selling, but your prospect is buying, right? And so they're experiencing and thinking about this in a different way. And so when they're unreceptive to the message, it means we are not addressing what they care about.
Yes.
In the book, you talk about these 5 receptivity barriers. Can you unpack some of those and talk about why that's important to understand?
Yeah, great question. There's 5 main barriers. The first barrier is their perception of you. Mm-hmm. And so, because when you really think about influence starts with an invitation. Mm-hmm. Until someone says, "What do you think I should do about fill in the blank?" And they may not verbally say it, but they have to at least think it. I'd like to know what you think. I'd like to hear from you. And matter of fact, if someone's at that position, influence really isn't that difficult. All you really need to know is the truth. Right. But it starts with an invitation for them to invite you. And the reason that we accept most invitations is because of who it's from. And so customers think of sellers as either trying to apply pressure, or even marketers. Like, it's all about pressure. You're going to try to pressure me and control me and try to move me in a direction that maybe I don't want to go. So they're rejecting that pressure. They also don't think that they're the hero of the story. They think the seller's the hero of the story. I want to sell you my stuff. And so when the customer feels like, then I should just say, so they're rejecting you versus rejecting a solution. So we first got to get bought. They're going to buy you before they're going to buy your recommendation. So that's the first barrier. Second barrier is, how do you get a meeting? And we built some very specific, and I think the most critical part of getting a meeting is how you position the meeting. Reps are very good at talking about their product, and marketers are very good about talking their product or solution. But actually, what gets a meeting is when you can articulate what's on their whiteboard. And so there's a big shift in how we need to approach getting a meeting. And then the next barrier is, how do we get to the truth?
Yep.
We can't change their beliefs if we don't know what those beliefs is. Then how do we get them to actually change their beliefs? Which is, how do we get them to emotionally experience what it is that we're recommending? And then the last one is, how do we get them to act? So those are, how do we get them to actually, okay, I agree with you. And just because they agree and believe it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to act. So that's the last barrier. So that's how the book is organized.
I mean, it's receptivity, and it's also there's a level of confidence building that related to, right? Like, I mean, you think about, like, okay, you're trying to get the attention of a prospect, you're trying to build some value, and even if you're doing that in a value-based, authentic way, you're one of how many sales reps trying to get their attention. Like, I think about this for marketers. We work with a lot of CMOs, and there are now like 8,000 different tools in the marketing operations, marketing technology world. So what that means is there's like 8,000 24-year-old inside sales reps trying to get the CMO's attention. No wonder they're not responding as many times to this. You also talk about, like, there's a couple other angles I want to cover here. I mean, you talk about like how to make the sales process easy but really enjoyable, and to me that goes both ways as well. Like, how do I, and if I'm trying to get someone's attention, if I feel like I'm being interruptive, then the prospect doesn't really want to take that call either. So there's friction in the very
lot of friction.
When you say enjoyable, like, I think some people may raise their eyebrow and say, can you do that? But give me some examples of where this process can be enjoyable.
Well, it starts at the very beginning. I mean, if I am positioning the meeting based on what's on the decision maker's whiteboard. Another way to say this, if I hold up a picture of them, they will look at it 100% of the time. When I hold up a picture of me, I'm going to get rejected. They don't care about me. And so we like to hold pictures up, metaphorically speaking, of ourselves. We like to say, this is who we are. This is what we do. Then there's a lot of rejection. But when I hold a picture up of them and I talk about what's important to them or what's on their whiteboard, that's going to draw them in. I'm also going to feel more confident when I walk into a room or write an email or I say, you care about this, so there's some confidence in knowing that my solution can help them. But the other things that we do that make it more enjoyable, at least it works this way for the reps that I've worked with and myself, is when what we call drop the rope. So drop the rope comes from this concept of tug of war. They believe there's a tug of war, that you're going to try to pull them to your position. You're going to try to force them. You're going to try to control them. And control is just an illusion. And when there's that tension, the focus is on that tension, and they're going to reject that tension. But when you say things like, I'm not sure if our solution is right for you. I don't know you that well enough. I haven't assessed your organization. I'd like to learn more about what you're trying to accomplish related to this whiteboard problem, and we can work together to determine if our solution would be a fit. I'd like to talk with you for about 3 minutes, and then we can determine together if it makes sense to go to the next level. So you're kind of moving from how do I win to how do I create a receptive audience so that we can together discover if your solution. So it's a lot less rejection.
Well, and I love the drop the rope analogy and the idea that like part of your job is to release the tension in the room, right? And to get on the same page. Talking today on B2B book club about unreceptive, a better way to sell, lead, and influence. Talking today with author Tom Stanfill. And the other thing that you've mentioned a couple times in the book, and I've seen this as a theme in a lot of your content, is sort of experiencing a deeper sense of purpose. And you don't hear purpose in a sales book very often. Talk about the relationship there and why that's important.
Well, I think that's another reason why you will enjoy what you do, is that when you wake up in the morning and you think about my goal or my job today, role is not to sell something, it's to help people solve a problem. And even though that kind of sounds trite, but that's really does orient you in a completely different way. It's like, I'm here to determine what your problems are. I solve these problems. I'm good at solving these problems. And that's my job. My job isn't to sell you something, it's to help you see a better way to get to where you want to go. And so that brings us purpose. So it's not begging we're not ambulance chasers, we're ambulance drivers.
Right.
But when we see ourselves as, like a lot of times when I was talking to reps during the COVID crisis, the beginning of that, they're like, how do I make phone calls? How do I do this? What do I do now? It's like, well, can you help? If you can help.
Yeah.
If you can't help, don't help.
Right.
It's like, but they told me to sell stuff. And so they wake up in the morning, I got to sell stuff. No, it's about you need. And here's another thing I think it's missing for a lot of reps. Reps can't lead. A lot of reps struggle to lead customers because they don't have the expertise to lead, which again, that means that they're getting rejected. People don't want to talk to them. Now, there is the perception that they don't know what they're talking about, but when you actually know what you're talking about and you can demonstrate that, selling gets to be really fun, and you find meaning in your role. You're like, I'm helping people. That's what we all want. We all want to know that what we're doing at the end of the day matters, and it's helping people versus I got somebody else to buy. Well, did it work? I don't know. Do you know what you're saying? No. They told me to memorize this billboard, and I memorized it.
Such an important concept that I think you're right. It does get lost. If someone doesn't have a problem you can solve, that is an unqualified lead. I mean, that's and it could be that, it could be they don't understand the problem. They don't know they have a problem. They haven't quantified the problem. And each one of those gaps in insight and knowledge, if you can educate, if you can provide that insight, that's part of the help. And even if they discover, hey, listen, I didn't know I had this problem, I still got these other fires that are bigger, it still reflects well on you as a seller. You're like, well, this problem isn't going to go away. So when should we talk next to try to make this a priority or try to find time to do it? But you're right. If you can't help someone, if you are not making their life or their business better, you got to find a prospect that has that problem, right?
Yeah.
And we can go all into sort of product market fit and say, well, if you can't find anybody you can help with, maybe you're selling something that doesn't need to be in the market. But assuming that there's good product market fit there, finding the right prospect, finding the right target, honing in on the places where you can really help, obviously super important. So we want to keep these talks short. Tom, I appreciate you taking some time. Obviously, unreceptivebook.com. What in addition to finding information about buying the book, what else can people find there?
What else would people? I'm sorry, I missed that, Matt.
No, on the unreceptivebook.com. Finding the book, but what other resources should people check out from you?
Oh, yeah. But I'd love for them to visit us at aslantraining.com. We are a sales training firm. We work with organizations that want to improve how their sellers are executing in the field or how their leaders are coaching and building a team and creating engagement. So check us out at Aslan Training. Or I'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm Tom Stanfill. Check me out on LinkedIn. Love to engage with you there. Constantly trying to post valuable information that helps sellers help them make it easier for them to do their job.
Definitely. We'll definitely check out Tom. Check out the book for sure, and a lot of his content. He is living what he is preaching, and has a lot of great content out there. So, Tom, thanks again so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. Excited to continue to bring some of the best of the B2B sales, marketing, leadership books back to you here through our B2B book club. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.